When Black Americans find out they are not Native Americans or indigenous to America.
This document is an official enrollment card for the Chickasaw freedmen, former slaves owned by the Chickasaw Nation.
Owned by the Chickasaw Nation.
Owned by the Chickasaw Nation. Your ancestors were enslaved by Native Americans. Here's your great-great-grandmother, Mary Kemp, her 11 children, including Bill Cheadle, your great-grandfather, William. And you can see William's father, Henderson, or Hence Cheadle. You are one of the few African Americans who was not enslaved by white people, but enslaved by Native Americans.
I don't know how I feel about that. It's crazy because
most people don't realize that the Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Choctaw, and Chickasaw nations owned slaves. As self-governing entities, they weren't subject to the laws of the United States. So what did this mean for Don Cheadle's ancestors? When the Civil War ended, the 5 civilized tribes kept their slaves. They refused to liberate their slaves.
Everybody wanted to roll with the slavery thing as long as they could.
That's right. They said, come and get them.
Yeah. Take my slave.
Yeah.
Pry it from my cold dead hand.
And I had no idea.
I had neither. This is amazing.
The United States government didn't make a treaty with the Chickasaw until 1866, forcing them to liberate their slaves and make them citizens. Chickasaws freed their slaves, but they did not offer them citizenship in the Chickasaw Nation.
The honorary white people, what's going on here?
Don, your ancestors were in Indian territory, yet they were neither Chickasaw nor were they Americans. They were a people without a country and without any legal status at all.
That's crazy.
The Chickasaw freedmen would spend decades in this stateless limbo, invisible and forgotten. By the time the century drew to a close, the United States government had turned its back on our people all over the South. But out west, where the Chickasaw freedmen had been living as stateless people for over 30 years, the status of Indian territory was about to change. In the late 1890s, the United States government drew up official rolls of the citizens and former slaves of the Native American nations. Don Cheadle's ancestors were among those who were ready to stand up and be counted. Your great-great-grandparents would have had to travel to Tishomingo, the capital of the Chickasaw Nation, in order to enroll. But it was a last chance for former slaves like your ancestors to claim Chickasaw identity. This is the land allotment records for Johnston County, Oklahoma.
Mary Kemp, Henderson Cheadle. So they got some land.
And the number of acres?
40. The fabled 40.
40 acres of land given to them free and clear by their former slaveholders. Can you imagine what this meant to your ancestors?
That's huge. That's economic freedom if you can farm it and work it and use it.
Yeah. Don, your ancestors suffered for decades as a people with no status at all. Yet in the end, they received something that other African Americans, as you know, only dreamed about.
They're 40 acres.
The vaunted 40 acres.
There it is.
And right down there where your ancestors had their homesteads, you can see the town of Wiley, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Now, Wiley was one of the all-black towns founded by former slaves.
So the whole town was free slaves?
Whole town, all black. Still, can you imagine what it was like for your ancestors to live through slavery, finally get freed, then be stateless for 30 years, and then find themselves suddenly landowners and landowners in an all-black town?
Yeah, amazing. It must have felt like finally. You know, free at last, for real.
in 1907, Oklahoma became a state, and the Chickasaw freedmen were United States citizens at last. The African American people wear racial mixture right on their faces. And the greatest percentage of our admixture comes from European ancestors. But for some reason, it's much easier for us to imagine another source.
He knew his grandmother, Elizabeth Redmond, and he said she was a full-blooded Cherokee.
Like almost all African Americans I know, my relatives are convinced that we have Native Americans in the family.
This is Lucy's sister, and she had hair down to her knee. I thought she looked, like a Native American.
And that's, like I said, that was my mom, and she wore 70s headbands.
Oh, that's your
so
mom?
in the 70s,
Oh,
she
your
looked
mom's
like,
cool.
Everyone thought she was Native American.
I have a little Choctaw Indian in my background.
She looked like an Indian woman. She looked like, like straight off the prairie.
They talk about the cheekbones and yeah.
She always had long black hair, and so, that's Indian hair.
But I've long been suspicious of these stories. How could so few Native Americans sleep with so many African slaves? Tina grew up believing that two of her grandparents were part Native American.
But you're only 1% Native American. You know how your family has always thought that you had all this Native American heritage?
Yes.
It was white heritage that you had.
All this time I've been thinking Indian. I was dying to find out what tribe it was.
You're from the tribe of Europe.
Wow.
And I'm 3% Native American. So I got just a little Indian.
You got a little Indian in you. 0% Native American. And 0% Native
There
American.
you go.
And 0% who were Native American.
We're going to have to tell the Choctaw Nation in Oklahoma now. I misrepresented myself. I'm not Choctaw at all,
And you'll see there's no figure for Native American because you ain't got no Native American.
Set the record straight.
Even Don Cheadle, who we would expect to have some Native American ancestry because of the connection to the Chickasaw, members of your family owned by Native Americans. But we don't find any.
Wow.
And you're not alone in not having any measurable Native American ancestry. 1 in about every 20 African Americans only 1 in 20 has any significant amount of Native American ancestry.
So apocryphal. Yeah. No. Turns out they didn't really dig you that much.